Welcome to the VAXA Bureau Intelligence Optimised podcast, where leaders across critical industries get the insights, tools, and connections they need to be ready for today and prepared for tomorrow. As you advance, your standards rise and your community narrows. That's the nature of leadership. VAXA Bureau exists to support that journey through credible information, secure products, and a critical intelligence hub built for advancing individuals, organisations and the Indo-Pacific. Stay informed, stay operational. The signal starts now. And if you find value here, subscribe, rate the show and share it with someone building the future of critical industry. So mate, can you share your story or some early feedback from one of the drop-for-drop installations and what impact it's had on at a local level?
Yeah, beautiful. So that first installation actually kicks off this Monday. So that's going into Cherbourg because it's the closest community that we can make a real world impact. It's just up the road from my joint. So there's 3 facilities there at the moment that we're working to get into. One is the aged care centre, one's the daycare centre, and one's the school. So 3 places where there's the most vulnerable that are in community. So obviously that is the logical start point for where you want clean water. So the 2 machines that we have going in next week, one's going into the aged care centre and one's going into the daycare centre. The daycare centre was actually featured by ABC probably close to 12 months ago now. There was an article. And that's where I became aware of exactly how close to home this problem is, because the daycare centre is chewing through over $600 worth of bottled water a fortnight. And that's because of the fact that the tap water is just that it's not reliably safe enough that the staff can use it for the students, and because of the fact of the small kids that are there, and because of the fact the quality can fluctuate so much, you can't even put a filter on it and try and filter the stuff out of it, because particularly if you're looking at any kind of parasites or E. coli or stuff like that, it's then depends on how much you're going to treat the water. So because your input is changing so much, that means you're going to change the treatment system. And that's just not possible unless you've got someone that's monitoring it every day. And that's why they're looking for a completely different solution. So bottled water is their current solution. And as of next week, it'll be atmospheric water generation that'll be starting to help them out there.
No, that's fantastic. Well done. I'm sure that'll go down really well up there. Mate, you mentioned, and just then, and I'm still surprised, and I think it surprises many, that Australia, like, one of the most developed countries in the world, has over 2 million people without reliable access to safe drinking water. Why is this happening in a country like ours?
So part of it boils down to what's required for the reporting for the SDGs. So the UN Sustainable Development Goals. Number 6 is clean water for all. And Australia actually reported to the UN in 2022, I think it is, off the top of my head, that we'd achieved that nationally and that everyone in the country has access to safe drinking water. Unfortunately, the asterisk that's next to that is everyone that is supplied by a water utility has access to safe drinking water. So what isn't reported in those stats is if you're a water utility with less than 10,000 connections, you're not legally required to report on either your quality or your reliability of your water supply. In a lot of these remote and regional communities, the water utility and the council is the same person, or the same entity. And I'm not having a go at the councils, because in a lot of these locations, there's a lot of there's a lot of underprivileged housing. There's not a big ratepayer base. So because of the fact that you've got small councils with no revenue, or very limited revenue, when you have a water treatment plant that reaches end of life for type, that's millions and millions of dollars to overhaul that infrastructure. And that's money that these councils just don't have. So because of the fact that they don't have the revenue that they need to overhaul the equipment, and because of the fact that these connections, there's less than 10,000 connections to some of these water utilities, that's why this is a problem that sits outside of the statistics. And there's a mantra in business that what's measured gets managed. And if we're not measuring this, then we're not managing that. And the reason that we're not measuring that is because it sits in the margins, unfortunately.
Yeah, I guess it's a challenge of Australia with our geographical footprint, small amount of people, towns, dispersed locations from capital cities, a lot of ground to cover. No ratepayers, so on and so forth. It's still astounding though that you think that, yeah, again, that we're a highly developed nation and we've got that amount of people that are going without clean drinking water. But I mean, yeah, you go from Australia into the broader Indo-Pacific, and that covers 46 or so countries, including the likes of India and Vietnam and Tonga and, other countries in the region. So how do you see this model translating across the Indo-Pacific, and where's the greatest urgency and the greatest opportunity in your mind?
So I think it's pretty much throw a dart anywhere into Southeast Asia, and the Southwest Pacific, and everywhere has the issue. And it's very much a case of either developing countries like India, or countries that are underprivileged in comparison to Australia. So the likes of PNG, in particular, those kind of archipelagos where you've got a ton of little islands. So therefore, you need scalable solutions that can be deployed to multiple locations and set up really quickly, or set up really cost effectively. And that's where I really see atmospheric water generation being part of that solution for that drinking portion element right now, because of the fact that, where are you, how much water do you need, and what are you currently doing? Because then you can scale that and go, right, does this actually, what size system do you need based off where you are, and how is that cost competitive? And although the margins in bottled water are reasonably thin, the reason that they are reasonably thin is because of the supply chain that goes behind them, the plastic and the transport and all of that. So if you eliminate all of that, and you generate water exactly where it's needed, it means that you can actually generate quite a big, quite a big value prop for whoever the end customer is. And particularly where people are buying bottled water, if you can undercut that cost of bottled water and then build in the ESG element of, okay, the people that can afford the tech pay for the tech, and the people that can't afford the tech are then supported by the ones that are. Particularly, it's the kind of thing that if I say, your bottled water is going to be cheaper, you'll be like, yeah, cool, that sounds good. Whether I say your bottled water is going to be 20% cheaper or it's going to be 80% cheaper, you don't really care. You just care that it's cheaper. So it's then the onus is then on a social enterprise like Aqua Ubique to that big value differential that we can get, the profit for purpose, and using that to actually get it into the areas where it needs to go.
That's amazing. And mate, the other challenges that you mentioned, logistics and landfill with the current solutions being bottled water. We set up water treatment plants in Nauru and Manus Island back in the day when there was unannounced arrivals with temporary accommodation. And on Nauru, population of 10,000, nowhere to store waste. They had a big plastic water problem. Anyway, we set up a water treatment plant, which was fantastic. Although the one problem is, guess what? Water treatment plants need to operate
Yeah.
fuel. Exactly.
Yeah.
Energy, the diesel that's required to operate these, and create another major issue. Uh, and then other issues around, well, whose land is it on? Then, the landowners, they would take the water before anyone else. So there are a whole lot of issues there when it came to tribalism, as you mentioned earlier, which is a challenge in communities, I guess outside of urban centres in Australia. But the waste one's a big one. What do you do with, um, you know, 30,000 bottles of water or empty plastic bottles a week if you're in Nauru or other countries like that? It's crazy. So your solution is creating a major difference and way of thinking that people can access water.
Yeah, yeah, and that's very much, I suppose, this is one of the benefits of being an engineer. Sitting down and having a look at the entire system and the entire value chain and going, right, how do we turn that value chain into a circle?
Hmm.
Because then that way, at every point, if we can pick up little efficiencies all the way along that chain, and then particularly if we can route that chain back so it turns into hubris and then it's going around in a circle, that's how you get actual systemic change.
Yeah, yeah, and mate, I guess that with your background and experience and qualifications, through the Australian Army. But you talked about, and we're talking about replacing stockpiles with systems, which is what you're doing really well here. So why is decentralised and self-sufficient infrastructure so crucial right now?
So particularly if you look at anything or even right now, so as we're recording this, you look at the floods and whatnot that's happening in New South
Mm.
Wales. There was a cyclone that came through and it copped southeast Queensland earlier this year. In all of those scenarios, the first thing that goes is power. And shortly after the power goes, generally the water grid will go down as well, because a lot of the times, unless it's gravity fed, you need a pump somewhere to pump the water. And as soon as the power's gone, what do you do? And this is where the issue that we always faced with defense is it's not even just getting whatever the resource is in the quantities that it's needed to where it's needed at the right time. It's then sustaining it there as well and making it resilient, because what you don't want is a single big fuel truck or a single big water truck, or even like a truck that's carrying pallets of water. You don't want a single mode of transport moving any kind of resource, because that supply chain is ripe for disruption. That's how, particularly in our army context, if you're an opposition force and you're trying to deal with tanks, or you're trying to deal with fighter jets or big ships or stuff like that, what's the easiest way to take out a tank column?
Yeah.
I'll tell you right now, it's not hitting it with a tank. It's finding the fuel truck behind it and killing that.
Yeah.
So therefore, how do you make that whole supply chain more resilient? Well, it's not one fuel truck. It's lots of little fuel trucks, or even better, it's you're generating, like, I imagine if, for instance, you had a solar powered tank. So it's generating the fuel that it needs exactly where it's needed. It makes it very hard to kill when you get rid of the supply chain behind it. COVID was a prime example as well, where all of a sudden you have a couple of ports that go into lockdown and the entire global supply chain just falls apart. And this is where, if you make the best way to make a supply chain resilient is to make it redundant and make whatever you need exactly where you need it.
Well, I can't see anyone blowing up the sun to get rid of solar power, but, mate, you touch on a really good point there. How does AWG shift in reality, and what role does our solar power play in the longer term resilience of water security?
So solar power is part of it, and as you would have experienced with running those water treatment plants on your road, would say how we're looking at water as a portfolio approach. So it's some of it's AWG, some of it's water tanks, some of it's water filters. Like, ultimately, where are you? What do you need? AWG, like right now, can be reasonably power intensive. That's why some of the detractors, that's generally what they'll bring up, that it's really energy intensive. So it's then a case of, when do you run it? How do you run it? And what kind of energy do you put into it? So some of the stuff that we're looking at, solar definitely plays an element, but then you've got battery, then you've got biodiesel, then you've got other ways of powering these things, and other ways of generating the energy required to run these. And particularly if you can do that at source, that's where this can really be properly game changing.
Yeah, and that is disrupting supply chains too. And we speak about sovereignty and national security and the importance of strong supply chains. I think that and you may have a similar opinion, or a differing view, but I think that some of the next larger wars in this region will be fought over food and water. And we've spoken in this podcast before, about that. And but water's rarely mentioned, around in the context of sovereign supply chains. Why should it be?
So if you're trying to undermine any kind of fighting force, classes 1, 3, and 5 are the ones that you're after. So class 1 is subsistence, so that's food and water. 3 is fuel, and 5 is ammunition. If you can't move, shoot, and communicate, you're dead in the water. So and particularly you look at something like food and water insecurity. So and this is part of one of the other issues that I came up with when starting Aqua Ubique. One of the other problems that we started to solve. One of the last jobs that I did when I was in the military was logistics for a long range reconnaissance battalion, and they were working off a bunch of naval shipping, and they were 72 hours in front of the forward force. You put these reconnaissance soldiers into places that they definitely shouldn't be in. If they're doing their job properly, they're not expending ammunition, so you don't need to worry about how many bullets they've got. They've got solar panels to recharge their radios, so that means they're okay for power. You can leave a soldier on the beach without food for 3 days, and he'll be tired and pissed off and hungry when he gets back to the ship, but he'll get over it. You leave him on the beach without water for 3 days, and he's dead. And particularly, you then look at how the military does water. There's a river, a creek, a dam, a bore, a single point somewhere back in the supply chain. That water then gets put into a big truck. That truck gets taken forward and put into a medium truck, and then a smaller truck, and then a jerry can, and finally gets to where the soldier is. If you hit that big water supply at the rear, you've killed everything in front of it. And that's something that we need to be really conscious of, in particular a geopolitical kind of scenario, and anything to do with the sovereign supply chains. Where are any of our resources concentrated? Because that's our area of biggest risk.
Yeah, that's really interesting. It's especially up in, you look at what was happening up in the Middle East a few years ago. I remember being up at Al Minhad and looking at, some of the water challenges up there, and again, it was plastic bottles. But what do you do with the bottles as well? In the middle of the desert, but how, and also, when you're forward deploying water, you can't drop a pallet of water, into an area where people shouldn't be. So,
And it's incredibly heavy as well.
Right.
So a pallet of water, that's about 1,000 liters. That's a ton.
yeah,
Particularly if you're using rotary wings, so if you're using helicopters, and if you're underslinging it because you're dealing with pallets, or even if you're putting it into the back of Chinook can't take many pallets at a time before, like, you might not be over volume, but you're overweight, and the thing can't take off.
yeah, and so, mate, tell me, how big are the units, and how much water can they produce a day?
So they're very scalable. We've got access to everything from your standard office water cooler all the way up to shipping containers that can do thousands of liters a day. Obviously, there's definitely a capex difference in that scenario, and that's why the questions are always, where are you and how much water do you need? But the one that we have in market at the moment, it's very much a replacement for an office water cooler. So if you jump on aquaubique.com.au or betterthanbottled.com.au, you can see what they look like. They're about 1.5 meters tall, about 400 mil deep, 400 mil wide. Think your standard office water cooler, take 15-liter bottle off, put it in the recycle where it belongs, put ours in exactly where that one came out of, turn it on, plug it in and turn it on. Air-conditioned office, that machine will generate anywhere between 10 and 15 liters a day pretty comfortably. And that's why it's a direct replacement for that office water cooler.
Yeah, right. And mate, tell me, where are you hoping to scale next, both, in terms of geography and program scope?
So the first, or the immediate target that we're after is maybe not solving the entire Australian water insecurity problem, but starting to get that full rolling. So we've been around a bit over 2 years now. So we've gone from a concept to a product to an impact project in under 2 years. Getting the wheels turning on getting these coolers into where they need to go, and getting the bigger, more energy efficient machines that we're working on online. Those will be here in the next couple of years. And then particularly once we've unlocked those bigger machines, we've got our sights set on Southeast Asia and all the Southwest Pacific. So areas where tap water is not a thing and bottled water is very common, because we know that wherever people are subsisting off bottled water, we can impart so much value. It's ridiculous.
Yeah, right. So mate, that's a big program. I mean, it'd be great to be able to do it all, all at once. But, realistically, what support do you need from either governments, businesses, or the broader community to scale the model effectively?
So the two biggest things that we're up against are so customers. We always have customers. But advocacy. So particularly in Australia, people don't realize how big of an issue that we have in Australia, and the fact that not everyone here can turn on the tap. And governments only care when people are making noise about it. So even like this podcast, now that you, the listener, understands how big this issue is, share Todd's podcast. It's not that hard to just hit share or hit it to send it to someone else. So that way somebody else learns how big this issue is in Australia. And that way we can start shining a light on that. And then from there, we've got the tech here, we've got the solution here. It's just finding like getting that solution to the problem and then getting it funded. And if we can get government funding to achieve some of that, that'd be awesome.
Yeah, that's fantastic, mate. So we had Catherine Conroy, one of our great friends, on a podcast a few weeks ago. She's the owner of Premier National. They're one of Australia's best advocacy firms and government relations firms. So I'll make sure I'll hook you up with her. I know she will. I shouldn't say I know. She'd love to help you, but I'm sure she'd love to help you. But mate, look, I guess, finally, for our listeners, policymakers, business leaders and community advocates, what can they do today to help close the water access gap in Australia and our region?
So if you have an office water cooler, change it over. If you don't have an office water cooler, but you want to help, and particularly if you've got ESG targets, or if you're a big enough corporate like that, so ESG, environmental, social governance. I bet you have a really strong environmental plan. I bet you probably got a reasonably good governance plan. What's your social plan? So if you need something to go into your report there to say, and it's not even to say, to show, to have real world impact of where your triple bottom line is actually making an impact, get in touch. We've got a number of different foundations and organizations that we're working with, that way we can help get your dollars exactly where they need to go. Because of the fact that it won't be going directly to us, it'll be going to these foundations that are doing the work that we then support. There's then that obviously that tax write-off there for you, because that is a charitable donation. And we'll be able to give you the photos and the collateral of exactly where you're actually having a real world impact in Australia.
Shannon, mate, today has been extremely insightful. I've learned a lot talking with you, and I've really enjoyed our chat. I'd love to catch up with you again shortly to see how you're going and what difference you're making in the regions, mate. And but mate, I really appreciate your time today and look forward to catching up again.
Thanks for having me on, Todd. I really appreciate it. It's been a good chat.
That's it for this episode of the VAXA Bureau Intelligence Optimised podcast. If you found value here, subscribe, rate the show, and share it with someone building the future of critical industry. The path of leadership may be solitary, but the future of leadership is coactive intelligence. Be ready for today, be prepared for tomorrow.